Welcome to the sixth episode of the Policy Frontline Podcast. We are Agata and Adriano, and today we are addressing a war that has shaped the European landscape and continues to challenge the very foundations of international security, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and the possibilities for peace in this war, including the European Union role. As we speak, in April 2025, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has persisted for over 3 years. Despite US President Donald Trump's campaign's promise to resolve this conflict within 24 hours, the negotiations he initiated have faced significant problems. To guide us through this complex situation, we have the privilege of hosting Dr. Alina Nychyk, who is not only a political science scholar, but also a passionate social activist dedicated to bringing positive change on a global scale. As a research fellow at Zurich University of Applied Sciences, she brings deep expertise in EU-Ukraine-Russia relations, Ukraine's foreign policy, and EU-Ukraine integration. Welcome, Alina. We are really happy to host you today.
Hello, Agata. Hello, Adriano. Thank you so much for having me.
So, thank you very much also for your participation. And so, to begin, since this podcast this episode actually will be really interesting. So, could you provide a concise overview of the current state of the Russian aggression in Ukraine? Like, what are also the factors that are preventing a resolution? So, we also heard, for example, in the last months, the US trying to lead this kind of negotiations in Saudi Arabia, the different actors also from the EU trying to respond to the US strategy. So can you give us a bit more insights in this?
Thank you so much. So the answer to your second question, what's the key factor preventing resolution, is very simple. The key factor is Russia, of course. So if Russia stops the war, there will not be any war, and there will not be any need for Trump to do his diplomacy, for Ukrainians to fight, for Europeans to rearm, and for everything. There is a very simple solution. Russia leaves Ukraine, Russia leaves its aggressive plans. Yes, so that would be the best solution for the whole world, and for Ukrainians, and for ordinary Russians as well. What is the situation now? So I cannot say that someone is winning or someone is losing. So both sides are exhausted, and Russia is not moving forward. If they're moving a few kilometers back or forth, it's not changing much. And both sides are losing lives of their citizens, and you see that Russia uses North Korean soldiers, and a few days ago, I don't know if you followed this, that also a Chinese citizen was taken into captivity by Ukrainian forces, which is, yes, very ridiculous. And of course, North Koreans in Ukraine is also ridiculous. But it shows that Russia is so much exhausted in its own resources that it's even this one resource that it does not appreciate, and it's not so careful with losing the human lives. And Russia has more population than Ukraine, but still it even needs to take soldiers from other countries. Yes, in Ukraine is losing its human lives as well. And regarding Trump, it's very interesting. In Ukraine, many people had big hopes on Trump. Not big hopes, but yeah, some kind of hopes, because yes, under Biden, Ukraine received some help, but it was also slow. It was bureaucratic, and many analysts were saying that the West was helping Ukraine just not to lose, but not to win the war. And there was a hope that maybe Trump, Trump is unpredictable, of course, no one could predict what he would do, but there was a hope that he would be less bureaucratic, and he put pressure on Putin, that he has some relations with him, he can convince him to stop the war. And we see that he's trying something. and he had there were some meetings between Russians and Americans, but still even this peace, this ceasefire for 1 month, although Ukrainians agreed for this, and it was not the best, the most preferable option for Ukrainians, because it gives Russia opportunity to rearrange its forces and to become stronger. But Ukrainians showed that they're ready for this short ceasefire, but Russians did not support it, and they presented a lot of different conditions. And the same weird conditions that they had in the beginning of the war, that NATO should leave Eastern Europe and many, many other things. And so we see that Russia in no way is willing to make some concessions. And so far, Trump was not able to convince Putin and Russians to stop. But Trump is unpredictable again. We don't know what he can do. He promised that he can make oil very cheap, and then Russia will not have money to fight this war. It may be an option. There are different financial instruments, political instruments that he can still use. So still, he may do something. And the situation is very dynamic. He can react differently, and we will see how Putin reacts. But of course, 24 hours has passed, yes, even much more, and there's a war is going on. And I can mention, I don't know if you read the news, but if you read today's news, you will see the name of my home city there. And it's not the way that I want my home city to be there. So
yeah, like this vile attack really, like even on Palm's Day today, like really like underlines even more like the cowardly and really like the harsh attacks by Russia, and in general, like how they are, first of all, not reliable. Like also you mentioned this like this kind of ceasefire that was almost like that was agreed also by the Ukrainians, but was not respected. Like not even 24 hours lasted this ceasefire. So in this respect, also mentioning what you said about Trump and his strategy, like he's not working, but we already saw it also in other fields, like in economic terms. And we can say that probably Trump is more like a businessman, and he's trying to make mostly this like his own business here in Ukraine, also the rare earths. I don't know, would you like to add something on this? And do you have any considerations? Considering also that, you know, it's a really weird and difficult negotiation at this point, and the evolution also of the EU stance is important. So.
It's very difficult to analyze Trump, and you know, some people say that Trump doesn't know himself what he will do, so he gets up and he decides. So I cannot say also what is going on in his head. And as I say, he is unpredictable, and it can work in both ways, in good and bad ways. So there is still some hope. But I think, yeah, as a businessman, so he likes to win, and he wants to make America great again. He wants to be a peacekeeper. And if he gives Ukraine to Putin, and if it will be some kind of tangible, really victory for Putin, that would be also defeat for America. So I cannot believe that he would give total victory to Putin. So I don't think that it can be that bad, because it would not be good for America. It would not be good for his supporters, and for the whole Western world. But yeah, negotiations are going on. I don't know. You don't know what's happening under the closed door, and at the moment, nothing tangible was achieved, and no ceasefire, no possibilities for peace. But yeah, we can still have hope regarding this, but it's hard to predict. I cannot say what will happen in 1 month, if he can somehow convince Putin or not. He has mechanisms to do this, probably. But yeah, did you ask about EU or?
Yeah, actually, yes. Also, like following up on this, like you also mentioned this, again, the unpredictability of the two actors here. And actually, on my side, personally, I actually saw that they are approaching themselves like Putin and Trump, like even at the UN. They voted in like together. They had the same position. Like there was a EU-led resolution in the General Assembly. It was passed, but it was astonishing to see this change of foreign policy of the US from backing the EU, so basically the EU allies to support Ukraine. Now they voted eventually even against. Like this is really a bold action. So based also on this kind of evolution, so how would you assess the EU diplomatic and sanction-related involvement in this aggression, like also considering this kind of shifts even on the multilateral level at the UN?
Yes, it is of course a pity that Russia and US voted together, but you know, UN resolutions, they don't have that big power. I don't think that it's a huge defeat for US, for the West, and for this war. I don't think that it's a very big problem. Also, it was disappointing, of course. And so I think it's not the end. We will see now. We still have to see what is happening with Trump's policy towards this war. And so far, no tragedy has happened, but we don't know. And we see that US is unpredictable. And that is why EU needs to react already, and we see something happening. I would say, and me as a believer in European Union, I would be very happy as a consequence of Trump's presidency if EU becomes stronger, more united, more geopolitical player. I would be very, very happy. And we saw in 2016 it did not happen, but now with this war in Europe, it's already the final call of all final calls. And we see something happening. We see these meetings. We see proposals to send peacekeepers to Ukraine. We see this rearm Europe and different options and involvement of EU, but still there is nothing tangible and there is no peace. What EU should do? EU should definitely make itself stronger, more united, and also make itself part of these peace negotiations. What the EU is trying, but it should be very consistent in this, that EU is at the table, and Ukraine wants EU to be at the table as well. So that's not decided only between Russia and US. That's a threat. And of course, there should be Ukraine, and there should be also EU. And it's very interesting how this EU-US response to Russian-Ukrainian war is changing. So from 2014, my previous research was on 2014-15, and many of my respondents, high-level EU policymakers, even I can tell you because he was not anonymous, Herman Van Rompuy, whom I interviewed, and he said that they always felt this pressure from US to do more sanctions on Russia, and so US was more against Russia than EU and more requiring it. And interestingly, in 2022, also some EU policymakers mentioned that US framing of the war also influenced. So it was a US narrative that now it's different. Now it's not just Crimea. Now it's not just we don't know what's happening, but it's already aggression against the whole country. So US was leading in this respect, in the beginning of first annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass, and then with Russian invasion. US created this narrative. Now US leaving Europe a bit and saying it's your main problem. Europe is more responsible for this war. So it's as I said already, it's time for Europe actually take this seriously because they had already pushed from US. Yes, it was there.
Yes, this is very interesting how these positions were changing recently. And following up on that, I wanted to ask if you think that it is possible for the European Union to support Ukraine without any involvement of the US.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. European Union was not a military power. It was more economic union, and they don't have army. If yes, there are different options. There is also UK. UK left the EU. It also some kind of weakness. There are options of European NATO or independent EU army. All of these things require, of course, time. And so quickly, in a few months, if US totally withdraws from Ukraine and Ukraine will have opportunity to fight back without US help for a few months, it's hard to believe that the EU can do it in a few months, but it's already going in that direction. This now 800 billion euros for defense, and there's also strong cooperation with UK, because it's also crucial that EU cooperates with United Kingdom, because United Kingdom was also one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine from the start of this invasion. So it's important that they work together, probably also with country where I'm currently with Switzerland somehow. And yeah, it would be very hard, but it's moving in that direction.
Yes, so coming back to our main topic for today, so the potential scenarios for peace in Ukraine, what do you think are the realistic potential scenarios for the to finish the war? Or yeah, what's your opinion on that?
But it's very hard to imagine any lasting and just peace with Putin staying in power. Yeah, as I mentioned already, yes, that Russia needs to withdraw. So everybody, even some Russians who are truly against the government, because there are some Russian opposition leaders who are only against Putin, but they still think Crimea should stay Russian, so they're not fully democratic. But some truly in opposition to Putin's Russia and these ideas, they agree that the only possibility is the total defeat of Russia, like Nazi Germany, total understanding that this ideology, this imperialism, and taking others countries, fighting against US, and that all these ideas, militarization, this fascism, which is from fascism, that all this was wrong, that the society needs to understand, okay, this is wrong. We're building now new Russia, new democratic Russia, new idea, and in our national idea, we do not have wars against other countries, against neighbors. It's our, that's what needs to happen. If we freeze the conflict somehow, then it will give power to give time and power for Russia to become stronger. We saw it already after 2014. We had the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements, and it gave only opportunity for Russia to become stronger. If we freeze the conflict, yeah, Russia still has other partners to trade with. The world is not united against Russia. China, India, Africa, North Korea, they all support Russia in one another way. Russia can become stronger. If Europe forgets its mistake and Germany starts trading with Russia again, as it was after the annexation of Crimea, of course, it will give Russia only money to become stronger, to build its army and propaganda to feed its citizens. So it's very hard to imagine without making total defeat of Russia or making Russia weak enough. And if you look at numbers, for instance, in December last year, 55% of Ukrainians want the whole territory of Ukraine back, including Crimea and Donbass. And but if you offer NATO and EU membership for these non-occupied territories, but postponement of liberation of occupied territories, then now already 64% of people would agree for this. But it's important to have security guarantees, and NATO is the only viable security guarantee now. And this number, 64 now, it's up from 47 in summer. So now majority would accept postponement, not recognition of these territories of Russia, but postponement if Ukraine gets security guarantees for its non-occupied territory. But it's also problematic because it's not only territory, it's people, and we know in these occupied territories there are a lot of human rights violations, tortures, persecution, Russification. Russians even mobilize Ukrainians in these occupied territories into Russian army to fight against Ukrainians. And also, if Ukrainian president, Ukrainian politicians sign peace that is not accepted by Ukrainian population, then Ukrainians would continue fighting and start revolution or start insurgency. So it's important to look at population, what population wants. And if we look at Russian population, there is Levada Center, maybe you know, they provide different opinion polls of Russian population, and now it's 80% of people support Putin and 80% support Russian army in Ukraine. And this number actually rose in the last 2 or 3 months, I think. And also, you can check, and your listeners can check this Levada recent polls. I have it in English. There are a lot of different questions. Very interesting. What are the reasons why they fight? They fight against NATO, against Nazi in Ukraine. And they also ask if they want peace. And 59% of Russians, they want peace, and only 31% want to continue the war. And interestingly, if Putin would stop the war now, 75% would support. So you see, they still believe that Putin is the leader, they can follow him. But then if you ask this question differently, that if, do you support peace if you give away these Ukrainian occupied territories? Then only 28% of people would support. So even if Putin says that, yes, we stop the war and we give away the territories, and only 28% of people support, because they are so fed with this propaganda that they will not follow so easily the change of this propaganda. So you see, Russians want war, and Ukrainians still ready to get the whole territory back. But yeah, situation may change, but just to conclude on this, there is no point to sign any peace with Russia without security guarantees, because, as I said, Russia would attack again, and Russia would become stronger and can attack Ukraine and even Europe. And there is also no possibility to trust Putin because he broke many agreements.
Yeah, so it was really interesting. This you already a bit anticipated also what I was going to ask, but just to elaborate a bit more on this. So you said that basically, so it's quite evident that Russians are not willing to have a peace right now. So they are not ready. And I mean, it's also easy to understand, like at a diplomatic negotiation with two parties, you cannot have a peace, or you cannot have an agreement if one of the parties is not interested in having a just negotiation. So building on this, I also heard, like, I don't know if you can confirm and what's your opinion on this, but there were some experts also framing a bit of a possibility for a lasting peace agreement with Russia, like really draft, really an ideal thing that, of course, wouldn't be the best on the international law and also on the causes of Ukraine, of dividing it also like as it happened in 1945 with Germany, so dividing the Ukraine territory in different parts. I don't know, I definitely know what's going to be your answer, but maybe there were some experts talking about this. Maybe you can say, and you can elaborate on potential ideas for a lasting peace agreement.
So first of all, as you mentioned, it would not be nice with international law. So that's already the first issue, right? So you will be, I mean, not you, but we humanity, right? When we agree for such agreement, then we will reward the aggressor while punishing the victim, which is against international law, and it will have consequences not only for Ukraine or Europe, but for the whole world, even if we speak about China and Taiwan and other places where bigger powers, aggressors may want to do the same, because, yeah, now it's possible, now it's allowed. Then, as I mentioned, so it will only give Russia opportunity to become stronger and attack again, because Russian ideas against Europe, against our Western civilization, and they will not be satisfied just to have a bit of Ukrainian territory. They will go further. We saw it already after 2014, after Minsk peace agreements, and then it will be not only attack against Ukraine, but against other countries, other EU, other NATO countries, and
I completely agree with. Oh, sorry.
Also, I mentioned this. That's also not only territories. There are people there, and we have already announced occupied territories number of human rights violations, and there are tortures chambers and persecutions and Russification, mobilizations, and having this territory, Russia will be able to take all this. Ukrainians into its army, and this army will become stronger and able to attack again, and we will leave these people to Russian mercy as well. So it will definitely not be lasting peace. It will not be just peace, and Russia would not be satisfied. And even so far, you have never heard from Russia saying that give us this territory and we will be satisfied, because they wanted decreased NATO presence in Eastern Europe and a lot of other things, that Ukraine is not joining NATO, not the EU, and you even have not heard that Russia can accept such a possibility.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. So basically, it would be like fantasy for them, and having this kind of agreements. Of course, also because it's a violation of international law, and I mean also common sense. And so, given that a lasting peace agreement, it's almost basically it's impossible at the moment, considering also who we have in front, because we are of course in favor of Ukraine and. In favor of international law, of upholding it, because if we give room to Russia, then we would definitely give, the hunger comes when you eat. So if you give them room, then they would continue to ask more. But considering this, and since of course Ukraine doesn't want to give up and must not give up to the Russian requirements, we're also risking a bit of a probably a frozen war, like a frozen aggression, like really long-term situation. But in this case, how the EU, because the European Union here is the major actor, even if there is the US claiming that it's actually the US being the big actor, but it's of course the EU to be the major actor involved here. So how the European Union can mitigate the risks, and what can do effectively already from today, because we saw Rearm EU and other initiatives taken by the Commission.
So what can be done by EU or other countries is total isolation of Russia from international stage, and total war against Russia, so making Russia as weak as possible. So EU may try through diplomatic channels, try to isolate China, India. Yes, they are trying, but they can try more to isolate all other countries that support Russia. Iran, I don't know how it can be possible, but as an idea, yeah, total isolation of Russia, of its partners. So Iran is a big supporter, India, China, economic supporters, African countries, North Korea, of course, the least possible option, but on diplomatic channels, maybe as an idea what to do to make Russia weaker. EU must be stronger, must be more united, and it needs to develop its military production together with Ukraine or on Ukrainian territory, on Ukrainian help on EU territory and cooperation with Ukraine. It needs to develop its also military, its army, unfortunately, in this current world. And again, experience of Ukrainian army can be also useful. EU can help Ukraine on its road to European Union with reforms, with corruption, with becoming stronger economically, with reconstruction, and yeah, that's. And I mentioned that the EU needs to make itself part of negotiations and become also more assertive and stronger on the diplomatic level as well.
Mm-hmm. And to follow up the discussion about the role of European Union in supporting Ukraine, would be Ukrainian membership in the European Union helpful in the peace process? Like, how do you see the potential Ukrainian membership in the EU affect the peace process? And what is your assessment of the potential timeline for that membership? You mentioned already that Russia would never agree to that, but how this process could look and how it would affect the war?
So EU was always less threatening for Russia than NATO. So this EU, this current process of EU integration for Ukraine, it will not make Russia angry or anything. So there will not be any retaliation for this, and it's going on, and it's very helpful. First of all, even this candidate country status for Ukraine gave Ukrainians hope for better future, something to fight for. So even symbolically, it's very important that Ukraine is part of Europe, not part of civilized world, not part of authoritarian Russian world. And we see how this Russian war and Ukraine's successful fight already resurrected the whole enlargement process, that all countries are moving forward. And now there are discussions about this enlargement package for 8 countries together, and Ukraine is locomotive in this enlargement package. EU is already helping, can help more with reconstruction, as I said, with reforms in Ukraine, with democratic institutions, and this also influences, also makes Ukraine weaker when there is corruption in Ukraine or democracy is not working properly. So this help is very, very important also from EU. It is hard to say, you know, some people both in Ukraine or in European Union were saying about 1-2 years, which was cheating, because it cannot happen even if Ukrainian politicians would be sitting and signing this acquis communautaire every day. That would take not 1 or 2 or at least 4 or 5 years, but they still need to implement it and to do other things. So now we have this 2030 as a goal. Which many say not realistic, but it's good to have such goal. 2030, trying to do everything fast but efficient as well by 2030. But it is hard to predict if it happens then or in 10 years. Some people say 20 years, but it's also political will, and it's also how the war develops and many different factors. There is one interesting point that some, some say that the problems are not problems, but home task is in Ukraine, and if Ukraine moves quicker, then you can move quicker. But others say no, there is no problem in Ukraine. The biggest problem is in European Union, because we need to change a lot. We need to change the voting system. So there is no this. Veto in foreign policy, and if 8 countries join, it will be even more difficult to reach consensus. As there is agriculture, structural funds. If Ukraine joins and if it stays the same, then Ukraine would get all the money. There are other things to change, and the EU needs to do its own homework, and it can be even longer than Ukrainian one. And some politicians believe that there is a need for treaty change. But it's very dangerous because a treaty change would require referendums in some countries, and it may last decades. And I also heard from Polish, actually, saying that treaty change is a German way to say no, because that would last forever, and that you just say, yeah, we want you here, but we just need to change the treaty, but it lasts forever. So it can be dangerous if there are some voices that want this treaty change, but there are some changes that are necessary also on the EU side. So there are different opinions, different politicians, just work needs to be done on both sides, and it's hard to say when it happens. Definitely not before 2030. Let's have this nice goal 2030. And if it's 1-2 years later, it's also fine. And let's work that it's not 20 years later, right?
Yes, that's true. Membership in the EU, it's a long process, but we here hope that it will happen sooner than later, because Ukraine belongs to Europe, to European Union. And as you mentioned, it's very important to emphasize that Ukraine is a part of Europe. And this brings me to the next question, that beyond the physical battles, we also see how important role information warfare plays in different wars and conflicts. And also we see that many people also within the EU are prone to Russian propaganda. So how you would assess the role of information warfare in this potential peace process, and also how do you think that the EU is doing enough to fight information warfare from Russia?
Yeah, it's also very important. Information warfare, EU is doing now much more than it did in 2014. It's closed its Russian propaganda channels, and it recognizes already this threat, but still Russia is able to influence different politicians, different political parties, like Marine Le Pen or other, like AfD in Germany, right? And in Europe, it's something happening, right? But if you speak about other countries, these partners of Russia, China or India, African states, this Russian propaganda is unbelievable there. And even in voting at UN, we see also some African countries voting for Russia all the time. And Russian diplomats actually make effort to come to these small countries, small African countries, and convince them with some legal means. So Russia is using sometimes even legal arguments. It uses Western law against the West. So Russia makes big effort in this. Russia puts a lot of money in this, and European Union doesn't invest that much in fighting this disinformation. Now it's better, but still it's much more to be done.
And what do you think you could do more to convince also other countries, as you mentioned, for example, mostly in Global South, to convince them that, actually what Russia is doing, it's completely illegal under international law?
It's also, you need resources for this, you need people, you need money, like Africa, people from European External Action Service were telling me, we are going to Africa, but it's totally lost for Russia and China. And EU, yes, it's a long topic, but EU needs to change a bit its attitude towards some authoritarian states and try to convince them not leave them to mercy of Russia and China, because they are not following all Western values. So you need to be diplomatic. You need to be careful. If you just leave these countries and China comes and builds something, give some investment, and then these countries are lost. And you need to have more diplomats. Russia has this. Huge companies of these trolls and bots that work in the internet. EU doesn't have all of this, because EU is investing in its society, yes, not in its military, in physical military, or in information warfare. So you need to have resources for all of this, and it's harder in Europe because European Union's democracy. You need to have support of population, and you need to convince populations that you need to diverse some of the funding from your health or education into the war. And even recently with the Trump, new Trump's policy, even like a month ago, I think I checked opinion polls in Germany and Poland, and still majority do not want more investment in military.
Yeah, even in Italy here, it's the same. Like there are even some protests, like where are we spending more on like billions of euros, hundreds of billions of euros in a 10-year span on defense, but probably most of the people don't get also why we need this kind of investment. And the other thing I wanted to add, maybe to like my opinion on what you said, that probably the EU is also in this limitation, considering that
yes.
yeah, no, I mean, apart from them being a democracy, like in general, like China has probably more influence than us on those African countries because they have a policy not to intervene in their state affairs. Probably, I believe this could be probably a potential mistake we have made, or I don't know, we tried maybe to export a bit of our policy making, decision making there, but it was not effective. And actually, I think that China that gives, free access to their resources without asking to change their internal affairs or domestic affairs probably also made, these countries choose China and Russia. Maybe it's also this. And
it's a very difficult decision. I can tell you a story about Ukraine when. If you remember, when Euromaidan started in 2013, when Ukraine was supposed to sign association agreement with the EU, and EU was so much concerned with Tymoshenko, with Ukraine's former premier being in prison, that EU totally refused to sign it without this. And for Yanukovych, it was very important that she stays in prison, and EU agreed then to leave the whole country to Russian mercy because it was attached to this human rights violation of Tymoshenko being in prison. And even speaking with Herman Van Rompuy or Stefan Füle, who was then commissioner for enlargement, they both said that maybe it was a mistake, maybe Europe misunderstands how to deal with authoritarian leaders. Because sometimes you need to make painful compromises. And then when all these discussions for many months were going on, and the EU just totally refused to sign this agreement when Tymoshenko stayed in prison, and Yanukovych totally refusing to let her out of prison. And then Russia came out with this proposal. Russia was quicker to accept authoritarian Yanukovych and to give him money. And then Yanukovych refused, and the Euromaidan started, and the war started. So sometimes you need to be able to think strategically and to think what is more important and how to make strategic diplomacy.
And so to conclude with a really short question, so what gives you the most hope and the most concern when you think about the future of Ukraine?
So concerns is Russia, so having Russia as a neighbor. So even if some peace is signed, what will happen? So Russia is there. So as I say, if Russia is defeated, this ideology is defeated and Russia is democratic, then it will disappear only then. If Russia stays in this stance as it is now, it will be always concern. Then these supporters of Russia, as I mentioned, such powerful countries as China, India, Iran. If we speak about Ukraine itself, corruption also concern, and now the level of destruction, and every time it's more and more. And for hope, Ukrainian civil society, because it's amazing, it was helping Ukraine in 2014, and now, now 80% of Ukrainians are involved in fighting war in one or another way, supporting the army, fighting information space, fighting themselves in the army. So Ukrainian civil society is really, and regarding EU integration, Ukrainian civil society was even involving itself in foreign policy, which is also unbelievable. So Ukrainian civil society is a great hope. And also integration with the EU and EU support for Ukraine is also my big hope.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much also for this hope in the end. I think we can still see this positive aspects, and as you said, the civil society and people, this is our future, and we can see a bit of hope.
Thank you.